Lori, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
It's an honor to be asked to be. Thank you.
So, I like to start every interview by asking guests, as a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, I love that question. As a child, one of my favorite musicals and something I did every year with my mom was The Sound of Music. And I had an affinity for Julie Andrews. I thought I wanted to be a
Oh.
nun, but it was really the space that she held for children and honoring their dignity and bringing joy and beauty into life and the spirituality piece. So that musical is very profound for me. So my spirituality and I think my passion for working with people. I also was an athlete and I love my coaches. And so I knew something with spirituality and coaching would be my skill set. And so when I found myself being a counselor and then moving into wellness, I'm like, oh, it's always been aligned here the whole time. So there I am, Sound of Music and coaching.
Well, yeah. And I was about to ask how you thought that connected to what you do today. And so I think you just explained that beautifully. So I met Lori at a wellness resort and spa in Austin, and she led a workshop on a labyrinth. And I'd never experienced anything like it. And it was very powerful. And the way you explained everything, Lori, was beautiful and deep. And I felt like I was able to connect with nature and with myself in a really special way. And so I was very excited that you accepted my invitation to come on the podcast.
Yes, yes.
So tell me about what you do today. So you're a counselor and you lead these workshops at Miraval.
Yeah, so I'm a private practitioner. I do have a private practice in counseling. I like to share when we're hired by Miraval, we get to pick a word of what Miraval means to us. And if you know anything about our ethos, the main word is mindfulness. We bring you into the present moment because really we don't live here. And I tell my clients as a therapist, you come into my office because you're being robbed of this space. This space of presence has intimacy, it has connection, it has community, joy. It's a pretty awesome location, but typically you're coming to my therapy office because you're being robbed of that space or something behind you, like a complicated grief or shame or depression, or you have something ahead of you, like anxiety or a need to control. And if you live in the present moment, you don't need me as a therapist. But I tell my guests and clients, guess what? We don't really live here. It takes masters to get back here into this space. And so all we're about really at Miraval, which is a beautiful setting for me because I've done everything from therapy to liturgy to spirituality, retreats. This is kind of a beautiful, colleagues of mine, we call it our laboratory in some ways, because those of us in the healing professions, the specialists on property, really are excited about what Miraval's about. And it's a beautiful place that's coupled with corporate, if you will, to try to bring that into space for the normal, if you will, the secular groups of life that may not be in a spiritual path or in a faith tradition. So it's a beautiful ecumenical center that can really just offer a beautiful integrative experience. And so being a wellness counselor, I'm not doing therapy on property. I'm strictly doing education, prevention through my lectures and opportunity to learn how to facilitate wellness in your life and through holding space, which is a big popular term that most yogis or gurus use. But to hold space is really how we create the pause in our life and learn how to hold it. And you and I really don't know how to do this in our culture unless you're attached to a faith tradition or something where we teach to hold space. And we really do move fast, so fast that we go to our jobs, then we go to the gym after work, we're doing high heart rates. So we're really not creating pause. So what we're about here and what the blessing of getting to work here for 4.5 years integrates what I get to do as a professional therapist, but bringing in the teaching component here. And it's really fun to get to educate and prevent and hold space in an experiential way. So it's a beautiful opportunity for me professionally, but we have a lot of guests that have been coming to Miraval for years. If you don't know about Miraval, it's a well-oiled machine in Tucson, Arizona for about 27 years. Austin was the first attempt to duplicate what we do in Tucson, Arizona. So we're about 4.5 years young. We now have a third property in the Berkshires. And so if you like what we do here, you can go to the desert, you can go to the hill country, or now you can go to the mountains. So wherever you feel most called, the ascetic can beautifully companion your journey in wellness and getting to learn how to integrate that into your life. So that's what I get to do here. It's kind of a fun job. So I can't complain. Yeah.
That sounds amazing. And I want to dig into a few things that you said. And just FYI, this is not sponsored by Miraval, but I
Right. Yeah.
highly recommend it. It's such a beautiful, wonderful experience. And actually, Lori, you're the third person from Miraval that I've had on the podcast. So
Nice.
yeah, so I've had Lee Wright, who has an episode on
Yes.
healing through horses, and Stephen Ross, who's an intuitive medium. So you said something I'd never heard before is that counseling is because we need a place to be in the present moment. I'd never thought of it that way. And that's a beautiful way to explain it. Yeah, there's something there that I kind of want to explore because that was so deep.
The rule of thumb I give in some of my lectures, and I teach it in mindful relationships, is that we have a statistic that says to grow an intimate relationship, you need a minimum of 15 minutes a day to connect with those people. Now, of course, I had clients that misunderstood that and they try to stare their partner down for 15 minutes. They're like, that was really hard. I'm like, that's not what I'm saying. So you want to look at them, but you don't need to stare them down for 15 minutes. But that statistic sounds easy. It's not easy. And when COVID first hit, as a therapist, my doors were getting knocked down by families because they're about to all kill each other because they're under the same roof. And I tell them the statistic, and they kind of laughed at me saying, Lori, we're 24/7. We're about to kill each other. That doesn't make any sense. I'm like, well, you're not doing the 15 minutes. I can promise you. So I really challenge you to start with the 15 minutes a week. We invite you to do 15 minutes first a week before you do the 15 minutes a day. And the reason why I start you here is that we really don't know how to hold presence for people. We don't know how to be in the present moment. We don't know how to hold intimacy. And we don't want to overwhelm you at first. And so in my classes, I encourage you to take this practice home for the first week, especially. And you're donating or giving, if you will, 2 minutes a day to every living, breathing soul in your home, including your pets. Because if you have pets, they are in the present moment. And typically you're on a screen and distracted, and they're trying to get your attention. And they're not trying to be annoying. They live here, and they're trying to call you back from checking out. And so the beauty of the 2 minutes a day, I actually get this from a friend of mine by the name of Leif Seligman. It's not mine. I wish it was, but she said this on a podcast herself once. And I told Leif, I'm like, you better publish this, because if you're not, I'm going to have to publish it because it's golden. But she says that this is all we're doing for those 2 minutes. If I look at you in your eyes, it lets you know I see you. After I let you know I see you, then I get to show curiosity and wonder so I can understand you a little bit better. After I understand you, then I can appreciate your experience in this life. And if you've ever worked for someone who's appreciated you or been with a partner who appreciates you, you probably go to the ends of the earth for those people. And it's not really rocket science, but do we spend time to truly look at each other, let you know I see you, show curiosity and wonder and appreciation? So we do this 2 to 3 minutes a day with every living, breathing soul in my home. The example I like to give is I have a 17-year-old. If you have any of these children, they live in their rooms. You never see them. I joke about when she comes out of her room, I start clapping and she does a bow. I call it the Bridget Bonnie sighting. And then she gets her food and runs back into her room. But the story I like to share of this example is I knocked on her door one day and I said, hey, B, I'm coming in. And she's like, okay, like why? And I said, I'm just tired from work, but I missed you. I just looked in her eyes. I said, I just want to hear about your day. If you want to share, if not, I'm just going to crash here for a minute. So I plopped down on her bed. I actually think I laid on her laptop so she couldn't even access it. And it was about 1 minute and 15 seconds. And if you've ever done that with a teenager for 1 minute, 15 seconds, that was very long and awkward. But after it passed, she starts telling me about her day. And that's when I started reflecting back what I heard. And at the end of it, it probably took her a whole 3 minutes. And I got up. I said, great seeing you, sweet pea. Just miss seeing you. Thanks for sharing that. And I left the room. She stared at me like, what the heck was that? But that practice went from 3 minutes to 5 to 10 to 15. Now it's a 20-minute practice. And she's like, Mom, can we get food and sit on the bed? I'm like, yes, we can. The beauty is, are we creating that space for each other? I have a dog at home named Simba. And if I'm on my phone, he's putting my hand down. And I know what he's doing. So I put the phone down, gets my eyes, but he's so cute. And I look at him and we talk for a good 2 minutes. And after that, he calms down. I've calmed down. He sits next to me. He looks at me like, you can get on that device if you want to. But typically I don't want to after we've connected. So we really don't know how to do this space. And so that statistic sometimes helps us kind of start getting a sense of what it means to be fully present with others. And so that's what I like to start you guys with. Yeah, 2 minutes a day.
I'm such a rule follower. So what are the steps to do it? Is there a right or wrong way? You said you looked at your daughter in her eyes and then you asked her about her day. So at first, when you started talking about it, I thought we needed to be silent. So we don't need to be silent. It's just very present, making eye contact and really listening and asking questions. Is that what it is?
Yeah, you're showing curiosity and wonder. So if you know that they had something through their day, I'm going to ask a question, tell me about that. If they share something, tell me a little bit more. You're coming in with zero agenda other than just to be curious and to appreciate what they share. And we really don't know how to do that because typically, even in listening skills as counselors, we teach you're already kind of orchestrating your question before you're even listening to what someone's telling you. And so you're already ahead of the game. So we're just asking you not to do that. There's no agenda for those 2 minutes. In fact, I fire my parents that I work with from parenting in the car because that is your most beautiful spot. It's a very sacred space with your kids. And if you corner them in your vehicle and start parenting them, they will never trust you and they're going to be cautious. But if you let them know that's a safe space and you let them know I see you, it's a beautiful practice because you don't stare them down. They walk in the car, you make eye contact. How was your day? They can tell you all that they want to. You show curiosity and wonder and appreciate everything they're sharing with you. You have all day long to parent in your house. And so if you have to parent in the car, I tell my clients to talk with your child first and ask, is that a safe space? Is that an okay place for us to discuss schedules for this week or whatever that is? And if they're like, yeah, we'll talk about in the car, give them enough respect because this is kind of the other piece about Julie Andrews in her role in Sound of Music was holding dignity for everybody around her. And that is something I do feel I champion and want to do. And how do we hold that space for each other? How do I see you and give you the benefit of the doubt? How do I foster your independence? Do I trust that you can make your own decisions? And our kids, after the age of 10, they're pretty much their own entity and they have nothing to do with you, really. But you're responsible to them, just not for them. So how do you honor that? And how do you show curiosity on how their brain functions and how they're making decisions?
And so the goal with it is to stay curious and to really focus on the other person. So it's not about a back and forth. It's giving the gift of attention, presence, and curiosity for what the other person is going through or has going on or. Gotcha.
And the beauty of that is that actually, when it starts growing into the 15 minutes, it can be a give and take down the road. But that's not the intention of the first 2 minutes, right? And you need to build that trust, especially with partners. If I have a spouse who is an introvert but spend all their energy today, they're not going to have extroverted energy for discussion. But I can check in with them, look at them. I can sit next to them and hold their hand for 2 minutes and just let them know I'm here to hear about their day if they want to share. And if they don't, I'm present. It's teaching that I'm not coming in with an agenda or my own expectations to be heard. It's not about me. It's about you. And do we spend time for each other to be that curious and appreciate the other person?
And is this something that you share that you're doing, or do you tell the person you're wanting to do this with, like my husband, hey, I'm wanting to try this? Or is that an important piece of it? Or do we just do it? Or, I mean, I know.
I actually invite y'all just to do it because it actually, in fact, I teach my couples the 3-second kiss and the 3-second hug. And this freaks a lot of couples out because you're used to giving your partner out the door. But if you give them a 3-second kiss, it's a little more intentional, and a 3-second hug. I'm married to a coach, and so I laugh at this because he'll come in or come home going, I'm coming in for my 3-second hug. I'm like, okay, here it comes. So the beauty of this is we're trying to create present moment connection that doesn't lead anywhere. There's no expectation. There's no agenda. And so this is why a lot of people, when I work with couples, avoid intimacy or physicality because I don't want it to lead somewhere. I don't trust that you're really caring about me and wanting to connect with me. You may have a need, especially if you're a physical touch love language. It's hard to trust that you really want to be present for me. And so we have to rebuild that again as to I'm coming in to connect, but it's going to be limited for now, right? And that doesn't mean it doesn't lead to things later, but we try to rebuild trust and intimacy. So we need to put some rules and boundaries around how we engage intentional time together. This is where Elizabeth Gilbert wrote her book, Eat, Pray, Love, years ago. And I'm not trying to plug the book, but when she wrote about going to India, I loved that she questioned herself, like, why the heck did I go all the way to India when I could have created ashram right here? The beauty is, how do you create sacred space in your daily life? How do you create intentional moments for your children, for your family. And I think we can get so big thinking it has to be this massive trip, or we have to go to Miraval. And I love what we do, but you don't need to come to us, right? But what we're teaching is how do you create those moments? And how do you become mindful and intentional in that space? And how do you hold it? And how do you teach your kids to hold this? Because a lot of our children are so distracted all the time. They don't know how to be silent. They don't know how to listen or to get into that creative space, which is what this silence and present moment mindfulness allows you to access those beautiful gifts that everybody comes with. But if you don't quiet down long enough, you're not going to hear it.
Oh, I love that, Lori. Thank you. We can all use some of that. What's going through my mind is like, oh my God, Lori has so much wisdom and things to share. Like, where do I go next? Because there's so much that I can sense that you can give to our listeners that would be really powerful. One of the things that I really got out of the labyrinth experience that you led was there was something about connection to nature for me, connection to spirituality.
So the thing that the labyrinth that you're speaking about, so just for your listeners, a labyrinth is a walking meditation, and it is a meandering movement, if you will. It's not a spiral. And so if you ever come upon a labyrinth, and you can Google local labyrinths and check them out, but teaching you a walking meditation, you don't need a labyrinth to do this. But a walking meditation, Thich Nhat Hanh is kind of the master that taught walking meditation. And he teaches to walk as if your feet are kissing the earth. And when you walk that slow and that intentional, say, for example, I drive to my job and I park my car. My practice of walking meditation could be from when I get out of my car to when I get to my office. And if I make it up the stairs or the elevator and I realize I wasn't present, then I go back and I do it again. It's not to be punitive. It's the fact that, are you doing a practice every day in the present moment space? And can you hold that maybe 5 to 10 minutes a day? And this is where meditation comes in. This is where all kinds of practices that get you here. And so when you walk as if your feet are kissing the earth, you actually lose your balance a little bit. We're not used to moving that slowly. And in the labyrinth work, and you can incorporate this in a walking practice as well, but in labyrinth, I teach the Chartres labyrinth, or Chartres, however you say it in France. This is an 11 circuit labyrinth that's within a cathedral. And in this beautiful labyrinth, there's 6 petals that are inside. And the teaching is that we're part of all 6 of those beautiful petals. And how do we connect to those on a daily basis? How does the present moment bring you into that space? And one that you're referring to is we do have animals, we do have nature or plants, and we also have the environment or the minerals. And so the question is, if you were just to sit outside today and look around and watch the leaves move on the tree, or you see a full sunset and you watch it, typically we're not fully present to receive that. It's like a Harry Potter movie, has all kinds of art pieces and they're all moving. And I love that because you're in an art piece when you're outside and you're one of the main characters. The question is, are you receiving the beautiful art piece that you're in? And are you looking at it? And so whether it's the weather or the changing, there's so much symphony around you. And if you're paying attention to it, it calls you beautifully into that present moment space. And so are you hearing the birds that are speaking? Or are you noticing the changing of the leaves and the seasons? Are you paying attention if I look at the ground and I start seeing an ant that's walking by? If you didn't slow down enough to even pay attention, you would never notice that ant. And it's not, it always reminds me when I read the book to my kids, Horton has a who, or the who family. Anyway, the little family that lives on the little flower. And Horton knew that this whole family's within. And I'm thinking there's so much going under your feet that you don't even pay attention to. And I really love the slowing down just to pay attention, because you'll see the layers continue to unfold for you and the beauty. But we move so fast and we're so distracted that we miss so much. And nature is one of the easiest ways to invite you back here. And it's here and it's ever changing and it's different every day. It's like an evolving art piece. So hearing sounds, letting all your senses get ignited. What do you smell? What do you taste? What do you see? What do you hear? What do you feel? And with weather changing, with heat or rain, moisture, all those senses are so delightful. And the fact that we get to experience life on all those senses levels is pretty amazing. And the fact that we take that for granted, there's moments where I'm like, that's pretty awesome that we get that experience. It's pretty amazing to be a human being and have all that. But we take it for granted.
Yeah, it makes me want to go outside now and take it all in.
Well, it's crazy because when we do the breath work at the labyrinth, it's crazy that you come into that present moment and you're like, oh my gosh, this has been here the whole time. but we walk right through it as if it's not even there.
Yes.
And it's powerful when you're in the present moment. It's amazing. It's gorgeous.
Yes. I love how you one that you used the word symphony, the way you just described the ant moving, because even that can inspire awe. I was just reading a book recently called Chatter by Ethan Kross, which is on kind of our internal chatter, our inner critic that can throw us into anxious thoughts. And he said something that one tool that could be used, and maybe you've heard of this too, is being around something, nature, or even like a little kid walking for the first time, around anything that causes awe or that inspires awe in us, takes us out of that place where we are very anxious, because it gives us perspective of like, oh, the world is bigger than just me and my thoughts. And so finding ways to, even having a picture of something beautiful in nature can have that effect on us. What are your thoughts on that?
Exactly. So the awe moment is the present moment experience, right? You can't have an awe moment unless it's here right now. And so the anxiety, you're not in the present if you're anxious. So I always teach my clients, I don't like to shame people about anxiety or even looking at it as a pathology. It's actually, I like to call it your superpower in many ways. Obviously, if you're getting paralyzed by it, we may want to medicate it or take some edge off it. But the reason you have it, it's a safety response. And so if you understand that, we don't live in a very safe culture for the most part. And so it makes sense why there's this trauma response, if you will, or this anxiety that's out in the world. But if we can get some present moment practices, we don't have to live in that state of anxiety. It's trusting. I used to teach at-risk youth, because I've been in this gig for 35 years, that if you're a cat owner, and I love dogs, I like cats, but my husband's allergic. But anyway, kitty cats have claws. And if you're a good owner of a cat, you don't declaw them. If they ever got back in nature, they need their claws to protect themselves. But what happens in trauma and anxiety is that we actually live with the claws out all the time, and you don't trust the world. And so if I'm an anxious person, I'm not living in the present moment because I don't trust that it's a safe space. And so what we're teaching you, whether it's therapy, whether it's mindfulness, we're teaching you to find sanctuary in space where you can retract the claws and rest. And the beauty of that, if you've ever seen a cat knead you like dough, even on your face, even if they have claws, you won't feel them because they're retracted, because they're safe. And so we're just trying to teach, where are the spaces where I can retract and settle and be present fully and be still. And that awe-inspiring moment is a moment where you're captured and you're caught. Alludes to your judging critic, and I teach that in my life and balance class here at Miraval. And you need your judging critic. We are not here to shame having them, but in our culture, I teach that they override everything, and your critic keeps you safe. Your judge helps you be successful. But when you're in the present moment in a safe place, you don't need a critic because you're already safe. You don't need a judge because there's nothing to succeed at when you're in the present moment. You just have to show up. So we learn to fire them from present moment practices in balancing our lives because they actually interfere. But when they show up, we don't shame them because they're just doing their job, and they overwork in the West. So you want to acknowledge them, but you also want to give them a break. And they're tired and they would love to have a break. They just don't even know. I mean, COVID gave a lot of them a break on some levels, but we want to acknowledge, how does your judging critic show up? And if they're distracting, we just want you to be aware that they came, but also give them permission to step aside and get an awe moment. And then they may come back again, but it's not the idea. The best teaching I give is the beautiful blow-up dolls at car dealerships, you know, the ones that kind of do this number. So those guys that do that, we teach about the stacked rocks or the cairns, and those are kind of cairns. And the beauty of them is they stand tall because of the breath and the uprightness. And it's not the goal to keep them upright. The goal is to have the practice of breathing to get it aligned and upright. So those all moments may be limited, might be few, but they keep bringing you back into this present moment. So we're thankful for them. We're thankful for children. I'll tell my guests at the Labyrinth, and it really crushes my soul when Julie Andrews coming out in me. When I see children run on the Labyrinth and I see adults shame them or tell them they did it wrong, they're not doing it wrong. I actually know exactly how to do it. And the rule of thumb of the Labyrinth, this path, is however you show up on that path is exactly how you're showing up in life. And those children are fully present and they're having a ball and they're in joy. And the fact that you just robbed them from that critic and judge just shamed them for something that they do beautifully. And they don't need a labyrinth to get in the present moment. They live here. So we have a lot to learn from our babies and our children who call us back here and our pets. So we don't want to shame them. Our critic and judge are way overworked in this culture. We just need to give them a break and learn these sanctuary moments, these awe-inspired moments to get you back into the present moment. And don't miss them and catch them, because there's many a day. And just make sure you're seeing them.
Yeah. Well, this makes me think of a moment yesterday where I got an email, and I use my coaching skills, so I'm pretty good about kind of bringing down the thoughts. And yet yesterday I had a moment where I read an email and I kind of spiraled a little bit. I was like, oh my God. And I looked outside the window. My mom was playing with my kids and they were jumping. They had put drawn chalk stuff. I forget what it is, hopscotch or where they draw. And my little 2-year-old was jumping, not knowing what to do. And my 4-year-old. So I just looked, I was on my computer stressed out about this email. And then I look over to the outside to the window and there they are playing. It was just so sweet. I was just like, okay, life is great. But then there's been moments too where that's happened. And I know I hear it in client conversations where that happens and we don't look over and see the kids. So how do we bring ourselves? So we've talked about awe, but how do we bring ourselves in those moments where we receive that email or we're stressed about, worried in the future about something, anxiety about something? What's something that we can do that snaps us back into the present moment or brings us gently back? Or I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, so there's 2 practices that I encourage with my clients, because when Linehan taught DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, that's really just mindfulness training. But the idea and the theory behind that is when you're anxious, when you've been trauma triggered, when there's been a cortisol hit, what they call your lid flips, right? And so you don't have access to all your skill sets, your coaching, all that gifts. When I'm flipped, I don't have access to any of this. What we're trying to do is to ground you and get you back unflipped, if you will. And it's what we call, another word for that is grounding. We're holding space. And so the easiest one is that, believe it or not, you and I don't breathe in this culture. So I teach the 4-7-8 breath. And I actually, when I meet my clients, we start there, because if I do this breath work with them and they tell me that they are still lightheaded, anxious, or dizzy, it lets me know they're really not breathing. And so we have to incorporate that practice. 4-7-8 breath, the theory and the research behind it is you want to double count your exhale to whatever your inhale count is. So this is why I love 4-7-8. 4, breathe through the nostril for 4 seconds from belly to chest, holding for 7, releasing gently for 8. I have them do this 3 times. And the beauty of this is that if it gets you back into the present moment, it resets you and it resets your brain from these other 2 cams and you're back in the present moment. So that's the quickest way to get you back here. And if you feel rested, relaxed, grounded, or centered from that breath practice, it's working for you. If you're still lightheaded or dizzy, or you're still in an anxious space, we need more breath work for you. Another technique that a lot of therapists use is accessing all your senses, because again, when the lid flips, you're not accessing any of that stuff. So it's going down your fingers, if you will. We need 5 things that we see. And if I can look around, this is kind of where you may notice the kids playing. I might see the bird outside. I might see my clothing on top of my arm. But you're noticing 5 visual things around you. You also want 4 things that you feel. So this is, I feel the fan blowing on my face. I feel my tongue moving around. I'm a little dehydrated. I may need some water. You're trying to notice 4 things that you notice that you feel. Then we want 3 things that you hear. So I might hear a bird singing outside, might hear that fan on the ground, might hear people talking outside, might hear a colleague on their call or in the next office. After that, we do 2 things that we can smell. So this could be my perfume. It could be a candle that I may have burning in my office. It could be rain or the mist that's outside. The last one is what you taste. So this is when we notice if we're dehydrated. I teach a lot when you're stressed out, our cortisol levels are high. And when they're high, you're going to get dehydrated. So we need to drink more water, more fluid. When you do all 5 of those things, that hand of 5, and you walk it down, you just got back into the present moment. And that's where you may capture something that you didn't notice, and it closes that lid. And now we're calm. So breath work and sensory work is really good techniques to get you grounded. And so this is where people may meditate, but if they're still in their head and have a chatty Cathy, it's really hard because that lid is still flipped and they're fighting each other. So we want to kind of get you into your senses. And that's where the walking meditation is beautiful, because we have all the senses out there because we're outdoors. So again, it's 5 things you see, 4 things you feel, 3 things that you hear, 2 things that you smell, and 1 thing that you taste. And hopefully that brings you back to right here.
Oh, thank you. That is so helpful.
Yeah. So those are beautiful techniques. Yeah. And hopefully you capture some of the joy of those children, that really children are a gift to us as well as our pets, because they live in the present moment. So let them invite you back in.
I love that, Lori. Thank you. That's going to be so helpful. I took notes down and I'm going to try this. I'm going to put a note or post it on my desk so I can remember when I have those moments and share it with my clients as well. I guess, Lori, is just to start closing our conversation. There's a lot of people, and I'm sure there's people listening, who are stressed or feeling burned out by work. They're feeling overworked, working long hours. I'm sure you see a lot of these people at Miraval. What do you want to say to someone listening who's feeling that?
So the easiest and the briefest way to get in contact, I use it in my Life and Balance lecture here, but as therapists, we use it in what we call solution-focused therapy. It's what we call the miracle question. And the way that I frame it here is that if you were to go to sleep tonight, and while you're sleeping, there's a magical transformation that takes place. And when you wake up, anything you're struggling with, any problems you have, anything you can't get your hands around, by the time you wake up tomorrow morning, it is completely taken care of. I'm going to ask you, what does life look like? How do your family and friends, even your pets, notice this transformation took place? How are you different? So I'm going to repeat it again, because your judging critic just popped in saying this is ridiculous. Lori doesn't know what she's talking about. Can't possibly work. So I'm going to repeat it again, because what I'm inviting your guests to do and your listeners is to journal this question. So when you go to sleep tonight, while you're sleeping, there will be a magical transformation take place. It's a miracle. And when you wake up the next morning, life is completely as you'd like it to be. I want to know in a journal form, what does life look like? And how do your family and friends, even your pets, notice this transformation took place? How are you different? So asking you, what came to your mind?
Let's see what came to my mind. Well, one, I'm thinking of someone who I want to share this with, and he's feeling pretty burnt out and stressed. And so I was thinking about him first. And then I thought, okay, I want to show up feeling kind of carefree, like easy breezy, knowing that things are going to work out, that things always work out. And I think people will know that because I'll smile more, I'll be more playful, I'll be more present, and not feeling like I have to, like, I'll be there for my kids. And yeah, I don't know if I haven't fully thought it all out, but
no. And it's in the beauty of sitting with that question. If you want to do that with your guests or your clients or your listeners, the beauty of this question, if you journal it, is it actually realigns your life. And it's a powerful question, because our JOBs, our jobs, really don't end up in this question, which is shocking. And that is not to shame our jobs. But the reason they don't show up here is that when we tease out this question, I do a lot more with our guests here at Miraval with that question. Once you journal it, the beauty is you just teased out the top 3 to 5 things that bring value and meaning to you in your life. And the job doesn't make it there. So let me explain. If it does show up, you're putting boundaries around it and limiting the stress that it's done to rob you of the time with your children or your partners or your community or your self-care or your ability and your tradition that brings you into the present moment. And because in our culture, and it's not to shame the jobs, it's just they're in a wrong priority, because our JOBs are driven by competition. They're driven by outcome and productivity. It has nothing to do with value and meaning. It doesn't have to do with relationship. It doesn't mean you don't have those beautiful things within the career that you've chosen. But if you keep and you lose your focus on why you do what you do, you're going to get burned out pretty quickly. And so if we're burned out, we've lost the passion. We've lost the reason why we do what we do. And so this question helps realign our goals into what is important and what is a priority. And how do I pour into those valuable things? And it's not to lessen the JOB, but it's to put it in its rightful place. Do you know that whole analogy of rocks, pebbles, and sand that Stephen Covey? Okay, everyone knows that one, right? I use that because you want to know, in my class, I teach you the 5 rocks, right? What are the 5 things that bring value and meaning to you in your life? And your question, when you journal it, usually teases out your top 3 to 5. So my five, just to give you an example, is my faith, it is my marriage, it's my children. I have a health rock and I have a rock called healing. My JOB doesn't make it in those big rocks. But what I get to do for a living by holding space to foster healing is exciting, and it's a blessed, very humble space that I hold and get to hold. And I love that, and that's why I love what I do. When you tease this out, you're able to remove the JOB back into what we call the pebbles side, because that's where Miraval is, that's where my private practice is. And when I lost them because of COVID, because we got furloughed and I lost my practice for a bit because we had to go virtual, I never missed meaning. And I actually made YouTube videos, not trying to plug those by any means. I'm not an influencer, but I made them because
plug away.
Yeah.
No,
Well, they're under my name. I don't even know if they're still out there, but I made them during COVID because I had neighbors and I had family that were really freaking out and scared. And I come with a skill set that you didn't have to be worried or scared. And so I wanted to put those teachings out. And so I made those. I never missed meaning for a moment. Now, did I miss my job and what I get to do for? Yes. And when they came back, I got to put them back in my jar of life. But I never missed my top 5 rocks. So the idea is we want to tease out. And when the JOB became, or I had a guest once who said, Lori, I'm a single woman and I only have one big rock and it was my job. And now you just took it out. You told me it can't be my job. I'm like, well, what do you do for a living? She says, well, I work with injustice. And I'm like, well, that's your big rock. Injustice and justice is your big rock. And you can love your JOB, but it's a pebble. And know that you can put it back in there. But if you ever lost the JOB, you're still going to be about justice and injustice. It just may show up in a different way. So clarifying your true passion and why you're even here and sense of purpose, I think is very grounding for most people. And if we lose sight of that, we can get very burned out because we're running that hamster wheel of life and we're not clear and we're not connecting to community or intimate relationship or self. I tell people your body is the longest relationship you're going to ever have. And I like to know, have you dated it recently? Do you take it out to dinners? Do you take good care of it? Do you talk to it? Do you show interest and curiosity with your own body? Yeah.
Oh, Lori, thank you so much for that. And thank you because as you were talking, I was thinking, oh, but I love my career. I love what I do. And then I was thinking, how is that not a big rock? That's literally what was going on in my mind. And so the way you just explained what that patient or client said to you, right? The justice and injustice is like, okay, what is that for me? Is it helping people, empowering people? And I'm going to do that.
Growing people and honoring their dignity. And it's like, and you get to do that for a living. So you found a career that brings joy to you, right? And can bring some passion, but it also honors what kind of space you want to champion for others. And you want to be kind of that champion in some ways to help people that may need that guidance in some ways. And so that brings a lot of meaning to you in your life. And not everybody gets to get a career that they love. Yeah. That can be kind of tough, right? So how do they find that? And again, if I'm a community builder, can I do that within the company that I work for, no matter what I do? But that's how I find the passion every day, is making those connections with employees or colleagues or that type of stuff. So how do we find that meaning each day and tease out the thing that brings value and meaning to you each day? I hope that answers some of the questions.
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much, Lori. So how can people learn more about you? How can people work with you? Tell us all the things.
So I am a wellness counselor here at Miraval Austin. So if you want to meet me, just come to Miraval Austin. I'll see you here at the resort. I do teach some classes and lectures. I also do consultations. My private practice, unfortunately, with licensure, I'm limited to the state of Texas. So if you're in the state of Texas, you definitely, since COVID blessed us with virtual, I now have a virtual platform in addition to my in-person, but do both of those as well. And I'm easy to find online. Google my name, pop up on Psychology Today. I have my website there. So it's Lori Mulady Burdick, and you'll find me.
Thank you so much, Lori. This is so helpful. Thank you.
Oh, good. It was an honor. Thank you for asking.